Under the evening sky of Vatican City, St. Peter's Square glows with candlelight. Thousands stand shoulder to shoulder, pilgrims, diplomats, families, and clergy, united in silence for one purpose: to pray for peace. From above, the vast colonnade seems to embrace the crowd like open arms, its marble gleaming under the amber lights. Tonight, the heart of the Catholic world beats in rhythm with humanity's longing for calm amid chaos. The statue of Our Lady of Fatima, brought from Portugal, moves slowly through the square. Cameras rise, tears fall, and the air fills with murmured prayers. In her passage, believers see hope, not as abstraction, but as defiance against a century still haunted by war. A Brazilian pilgrim waves his national flag, another clutches a rosary worn from years of prayer. The scene is at once ancient and modern, faith meeting technology, devotion illuminated by the flashes of smartphones. When Pope Leo XIV finally appears in his Pope-mobile, the square erupts. A sea of voices calling his name, hands raised not in protest or triumph, but in blessing. His white cassock gleams against the deepening violet sky. Around him, chants of Ave Maria roll like soft waves against the basilica walls. It is October 11th, 2025, and the world, yet again, stands on the brink. In Eastern Europe, new lines of conflict threaten fragile ceasefires. In the Middle East, the echoes of destruction linger over Gaza and beyond. Across the Pacific, nations race to expand their arsenals. And here, within this sacred square, the pontiff's message slices through the noise of geopolitics with quiet precision. Lay down your sword, Pope Leo XIV proclaims, his voice solemn yet resolute. Disarm your hands, and even more importantly, your hearts. The crowd stills. The words, ancient, simple, dangerous, carry the weight of centuries. They are not just addressed to the faithful, but to presidents, generals, and ministers watching from afar. For a moment, the Vatican becomes a pulpit to the world. The Pope's appeal is not new, but it feels urgent. Wars no longer declare themselves with formalities. They emerge in pixels, sanctions, and drones. The Holy See has long warned against what it calls the globalization of indifference, and tonight that warning returns with force. As he blesses a newborn held up from the crowd, the cameras linger. The symbolism is almost too perfect. Innocence meeting authority, hope confronting fear. In that instant, the message of the vigil crystallizes. Faith can still resist fatalism. Pope Leo XIV sits before the statue of Our Lady of Fatima. Behind him, the dome of St. Peter's gleams like a lantern against the Roman dusk. He bows his head. Around him, silence deepens until even the murmurs of prayer dissolve into breath. For believers, this is not performance. It is intercession. An act that transcends politics, yet inevitably speaks to it. Then, in Italian, the pontiff continues, "Lay down your sword" is a message addressed to the powerful of this world, to those who guide the fate of peoples. Have the courage to disarm. No idea, faith, or policy justifies killing. It is a line that will travel far beyond the Vatican's walls, quoted by news anchors, debated in parliaments, dismissed by cynics, and embraced by millions. Yet here, under the Vatican's colonnades, it feels less like a statement and more like a plea. Over recent months, Pope Leo XIV has emerged as one of the most outspoken voices for what he calls unarmed peace. Since his election, his papacy has sought to bridge moral authority and political relevance, a delicate balance in a world skeptical of both. From climate diplomacy to humanitarian corridors, from refugee protection to nuclear disarmament, Leo XIV has insisted that faith must not retreat into ritual but step into reality. His critics accuse him of idealism. His defenders call it courage. Tonight, his words seem designed not to comfort, but to confront. He knows the limits of papal power. Yet history has shown that moral gestures, when delivered at the right moment, can shift the conscience of nations. The vigil itself is steeped in symbolism. The statue of Fatima recalls the apparitions of 1917, when the Virgin Mary was said to have warned humanity against sin, war, and atheism. A century later, those prophecies resonate anew, now refracted through the lens of modern conflict, nuclear threats, ecological collapse, and ideological extremism. As incense curls into the night air, Pope Leo XIV bows again. Peace, he says softly, is unarmed and disarming. The phrase draws murmurs through the crowd, a reminder that peace is not merely the absence of war, but the deliberate act of surrendering superiority. Beyond the square, the world listens, if only briefly. News outlets flash the images across screens, the Pope praying before the statue, the crowd holding candles, the words "lay down your sword" emblazoned on subtitles. But inside Vatican City, the mood remains deeply personal. A woman kneels, whispering the names of her sons serving in distant armies. A group of refugees from South Sudan hold a handmade banner reading, "We came to pray for those who cannot." As the Pope prays, his hands tremble slightly. He is, after all, an aging shepherd burdened with the sorrows of a turbulent flock. Yet when he looks up, his eyes are steady, clear, unwavering, and full of something the world too easily forgets: mercy. He recalls another gospel moment when Jesus told Peter in the Garden of Gethsemane, "Put away your sword." It is not weakness, he reminds the faithful, but divine strength to refuse violence. And in a world where power is often defined by destruction, such a message feels revolutionary. The crowd joins in the rosary, the repetitive rhythm of prayer weaving through the night like a heartbeat. Each Hail Mary a small act of resistance against despair, each candle a spark of human solidarity. The journalist's eye catches a detail: a young girl asleep in her mother's arms, the flicker of a candlelight reflected in her hair. This, too, is what the Pope means. Peace, not as treaty or slogan, but as protection of innocence, preservation of the ordinary. As the vigil continues, the narration broadens its scope, because this moment at the Vatican ripples through a world exhausted by confrontation. In Washington and Moscow, in Jerusalem and Tehran, in Kyiv and Beijing, governments face the same dilemma: how to balance defense with humanity. The Pope's plea is a mirror, reflecting not only global systems but personal choices. Disarmament, he suggests, begins not with treaties but with hearts. Outside the Basilica, reporters transmit live updates. Analysts debate whether his message has political bite or spiritual naivety. Yet among those gathered, there is little concern for headlines. They came not for spectacle, but for solace, and perhaps for a reminder that moral authority still exists, even in the age of cynicism. As the prayers end, the Pope slowly rises. The bells of St. Peter's toll, solemn, resonant, ancient. He blesses the crowd once more, his gesture tracing the sign of peace across the night sky. Then, as he departs behind the statue of Fatima, the cameras capture a final image. The pontiff silhouetted against the basilica's great bronze doors, the light haloing around him like a benediction. What remains is the echo of his voice. The leaders of this world build empires with power and money, but not so with you. The master has no throne, but kneels at the feet of his friends. The phrase reverberates like a warning that true authority lies in service, not domination. It is a reminder drawn from the very roots of Christian faith, yet it speaks across belief systems. To a world caught between pride and peril, Leo XIV offers an inversion: humility as leadership, compassion as defense, forgiveness as power. Later, Vatican officials will describe the vigil as one of the most attended peace events since the days of John Paul II. Diplomatic cables will quietly circulate, analysing whether the Pope's remarks were aimed at specific leaders. Commentators will compare his tone to that of the Cold War popes, moral voices in an age of nuclear anxiety. But to those who were there, none of that matters. What they remember is the feeling: the vast square turned sanctuary, the candles mirrored in tears, the rare unity of thousands breathing the same silent prayer. It is, for one night, a world briefly at peace with itself. As dawn begins to lighten the Roman sky, the pilgrims begin to leave. Banners fold, candles extinguish, yet the stillness lingers. On the basilica facade, the Latin inscription, "Tu es Petrus," you are Peter, glows faintly. The words that founded a church now frame a question for the modern age. Can faith still confront fear without violence? For Pope Leo XIV, the answer seems clear. Faith must not stand aside. It must stand between enemy and enemy, between fear and hope, between the weapon and the hand that wields it. That, he suggests, is the meaning of disarmament, not the absence of defence, but the triumph of conscience over calculation. In his final words of the night, spoken softly before turning toward the basilica, he prays, "Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is darkness, light." The crowd joins in, their voices rising into a single, trembling harmony. For a fleeting moment, St. Peter's Square becomes what humanity could be, unarmed, unafraid, and united. The bells strike again. The Pope disappears through the basilica doors. Behind him, thousands remain, not in despair, but in quiet determination. The vigil is over, but its message endures. Peace, though fragile, begins wherever a heart chooses to lay down its sword.